Welcome back. So our next question is simply this. What is the play about? Well, let's begin by recalling in brief the plot. In Act 1, Macbeth and Banquo, two of King Duncan's heroic generals, come across some witches who predict that Macbeth will not only become Thane of Cawdor, but also King of Scotland. And while Banquo will not be king himself, his descendants will. The witch's prophecy, much like Hamlet's encounter with his father's ghost, propels the action of the play. Once Macbeth learns that he has indeed become Thane of Cawdor, the crown would seem to be in his grasp. He writes to his wife. Lady Macbeth is transported by the news of noble having and of royal hope, and conveniently, King Duncan will be spending the night at their castle, and the Macbeths plot to kill him and blame his murder on his drunken grooms. After much goading by his wife in Act 2, Macbeth does the deed, stabbing Duncan to death in his sleep. Upon the discovery of the murder, everyone suspects foul play, and Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Dolabane, flee, fearing for their own lives. Macbeth becomes king, but can he keep it? After all, the witches predicted that Banquo's descendants would inherit the throne, and so in Act 3, Macbeth arranges for Banquo and his son Fleance to be murdered, and while Banquo is stabbed to death, his son escapes. That night, Macbeth sees Banquo's ghost. He is racked with guilt. His wife certainly is. As we find out later, unable to sleep, she eventually takes her own life. Now in Act 4, Macbeth returns to the witches in the famous cauldron scene. There he learns that he needn't fear any man of woman born, nor can he be defeated until a forest, Birnam Wood, marches into battle against him. Nonetheless, it is Banquo's successors and not his that will inherit the throne. At that point, Macbeth embarks on a bloody rampage, having the hero Mcduff's wife and children slaughtered when he cannot get to Mcduff himself. Mcduff has fled to England, seeking out Malcolm and persuading him to lead an army against Macbeth. In the final act, Macbeth naturally gets his comeuppance. Not only does he learn that Birnam Wood is creeping up Dunsany Hill towards him, Malcolm's soldiers are carrying branches of camouflage for their assault on Macbeth's castle, but that his overwrought wife has committed suicide. In this final battle scene, Mcduff challenges Macbeth, and Macbeth learns that Mcduff is the child of a Caesarean birth, hence not of woman born in some strange sense, a bit of a trick, you might say. Mcduff triumphs, decapitates Macbeth off stage, and brings the head to Malcolm, the new king of Scotland. So what is it all about? The play asks us several provocative questions, including the role of fate in our lives and of our own agency. After all, why didn't Macbeth leave well enough alone? He himself says, if chance will have me king, why chance will crown me without my stir. But stir he does, or he is stirred by his ravenous wife. There is no doubt that she is a bully. Lady Macbeth belittles her husband's manhood in order to goad him into doing the deed, murdering Duncan and taking the crown. When he dithers, she counters, art thou afraid? When he responds, I dare do all that may become a man, who dares do more is none. She snaps back, when durst you do it? Then you were a man, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. Lady Macbeth, who constantly uses ridicule as her weapon, poses forth a degenerate form of manhood, one not based on virtue, but sheer willfulness, pride, and ambition. She belittles Macbeth time and again. When he can't return to the murder scene to put the bloody daggers back, she says, fie, my lord, fie, a soldier and afraid. And again, during the banquet scene, when Macbeth is rattled by seeing Banquo's ghost, she chides him, are you a man? But Shakespeare never implies that Macbeth is a weakling, nor is he without virtue. Shakespeare introduces him in the play as a god of war, courageous and loyal in his king's service. In Act 1, Scene 2, before we ever see Macbeth, he is introduced by a wounded captain in a speech filled with themes of honor, militarism, masculinity, and loyalty. Here is the bloody captain describing Macbeth's role in Duncan's war. Macbeth carved up the rebel Macdonald from the nave or the crotch to the jaw. For brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name, disdaining fortune, and with brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution, like valor's minion, carved out his passage, till he faced the knave, MacDonald, which he ne'er shook hands or bade him farewell, till he had unseamed him from the knave to the chops, and fixed his head upon our battlements. Macbeth is a soldier and a man of action, so unlike the university student, the philosophical Hamlet. Macbeth isn't given time to ponder the witch's prophecy. Duncan is only stopping at the castle for one night and will leave soon. Timing and opportunity are everything. Once he embarks upon his bloody course, Macbeth is thrust upon a relentless process of acquiring and maintaining power, in the course of which he seems to lose himself. Tyranny squeezes the life out of him, or at least everything that was good and valorous and upright. Pared down by the end of the play, when Macbeth learns of his wife's death, his reaction is muted, and hence we have his most famous soliloquy. Macbeth says, "She should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word." Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools, the way to dusty death. Out, out, breathe candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard of no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. What could be more horrid than this empty view of life? Moral contexts, such as Christianity, are irrelevant. There is only a vast cosmological emptiness, where time, tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow are meaningless. And all our yesterdays are merely stepping stones on the road to dusty death. And death itself is meaningless, signifying nothing. Is this the modern condition? Now, hold on, I'm not arguing that this is the meaning of the play, that life is meaningless. Remember that the play does have a resolution. Malcolm regains his father's throne, and in the final lines of the play, Malcolm sets time right and invokes God. What's more to do, which would be planted newly with time, we will perform in measure, time, and place. There will be a reckoning and meaning supplied by God's grace. But Malcolm's last lines are not memorable. What we remember is what happened to Macbeth. That is a good story, and perhaps a reflection on what can happen to any one of us when we choose the course of action guided only by naked ambition. What the great poet and critic Samuel Taylor Coleridge called the turbulent and unsanctified cravings of individual will. Coleridge also wrote this, worth remembering whenever we read Shakespeare, that through Shakespeare's characters we can see ourselves. Thus is Shakespeare always master of himself and of his subjects. We see all things in him as images in a calm lake, most distinct, most accurate. But he requires your sympathy and your submission. Now that identification with Shakespeare's characters, that sympathy and submission to the characters we meet and the places he takes us, can be brought about by merely reading and feeling his words. But so much the better if we can see them acted out on stage and screen. The performance history of Macbeth is the topic of our next segment.